Douglas-Osborn and I work for Tameside Educational Psychology Service. And Carla, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Carla Tomlinson and I work for Salford Educational Psychology Service.
So firstly, thank you very much for listening to us in our session. I think before we start, it's just important to acknowledge that it's a really tricky time at the moment for lots of different reasons. And to say, particularly in early years, there's been quite high expectations with settings being open all through COVID and the pandemic, and also with schools being open as well, looking after key worker children. So we just wanted to take this time to say thank you for that, because I know it's been a lot for a lot of people. At the moment, a lot of us are spending a lot of time looking after other people, other members of staff, other children that we have in our settings, but this session that Carla and I are going to be talking about is about your own well-being. So we're hoping now that we can take this half an hour just for you and talk about things that might be helpful for that. So just before we start, what I'd like you to do is on a post-it or a piece of paper, or if you don't have one in front of you, just have a think about something. Or write down some of the challenges around your well-being at the moment. And this could be things in school, this could be things in your setting, and we're just going to park those until the end of the session. And it's not that we're getting rid of them, but we're acknowledging them, we're putting them to one side, and it might be some of the things that Carla and I discussed today might help around that. So I'll just give you a minute or so. Right, if we move on now to just having a think about some of the factors associated with well-being, and this can be really helpful for thinking about your own well-being, and are there particular gaps in this? Are these things that you do, things that you struggle with? So we can think about how we might be able to plug some of those gaps. So one of these factors that's talked about a lot is called emotional labour. Now, emotional labour is when we might have been having a tricky time, might be on the way into work, last night, things going on in our personal life, and we get to work, and rather than saying, I've had a really difficult day, we put a big smile on and we get on with it. And I have to say, I think we are all at some points guilty of that. And it can be really helpful if we don't have the time, the capacity to talk about it, or it's just not appropriate, then just getting on with it can be helpful. But if we start to do this all the time and we're not expressing how we're feeling and letting those emotions out, long term it can be really impactful on emotional well-being. We all have a cup, and we all have so much room in our cup of things that go on, different emotions, different stresses, different strains. And if we're using emotional labour all the time, then our cup is going to get full and it's going to overspill. So that's something that's really worth thinking about in terms of our own well-being. Then we have a sense of competence. This is knowing that we are good at something, that we can do something and we can do it well. And that's really tricky at the moment with everything going on, because sometimes we're not feeling that we're doing things as well as we should be, or could be doing things better. My manager always says that we don't have to work towards having an A day in terms of A being the best day, B being not as good, but we don't have to work towards this gold standard all the time, and we can have a C day, and that's okay. The next factor is around relatedness, and this is about connecting with others. This is so important at the moment, that we relate to others, we spend time with others, and that's really hard. So we might have to think in our school or in our nursery how we do that. Sense of autonomy is around control. Do we have enough control in our own lives? We have very little control, unfortunately, at the moment with everything going on. But how can we take back control? How can we have some control? Or how can we support other people in our settings to have that control? And then lastly, resilience, our ability to cope with difficult situations. And we need lots of things to help us be able to cope with difficult situations. So it's making sure that we have enough of those protective factors, things that we like doing, things that are important to us, that we can hold on to when we do have a difficult time, because that's what helps us go through. So hopefully those are just helpful in thinking about your own well-being, if there's any of those things you do or don't do, or things that you might need to think about. The other important aspect of well-being is we might do loads of things as an individual that really help us with our own well-being, but if we're not supported by our setting, then it's not going to work. We want to be in the middle here. We want to value our own well-being, have time for our own well-being, do things for ourselves, but we also want to be in a setting that really supports well-being. It's always on their agenda, and they might have policies, procedures about supporting well-being, so it can help us be in the middle and really help how we're feeling. Right, I'll just move on to Carla.
Thanks, Erica. So over the next few slides, we're going to have a look at some frameworks for wellbeing, or some models for wellbeing that you might be able to draw upon. So the slide at the minute is showing a model that's about recovery following what we might call a critical incident, or a traumatic or adverse incident. We haven't been in a pandemic before, but there's a wealth of research that shows us how we can respond and how we can recover following critical incidents, and so we've drawn upon that research to help this to frame how you might support your well-being at the current time. So on the left-hand side, there's the different sort of areas there that form part of this framework. So at the very top of there, we've got emotional well-being, which needs to go first. And I think that's quite clear from the slides previously that Erica has discussed as well, that we need to put our well-being first. How can we do this, or what kind of questions might we ask? Well, we might ask ourselves, when I feel good, what sorts of things am I doing? What sorts of things help us to feel well emotionally? And on the next slide, I'll be able to go through those in a bit more detail as well. We also might ask, what are our strengths and core values? What really matters to me? What am I passionate about? So you might look within your settings at the sorts of things that you hold dear, and reaffirming those. Placing relationships at the centre of everything. So like we said before, reaching out, connecting to people, making those connections with people that we work with. This is even harder at the minute, obviously, with COVID, and it's important that we reach out and we make those connections. Reaffirming safety and routines. The research shows quite clearly that following critical incidents or difficult times, that having that routine in place makes people feel emotionally safe. So it's how we can do that, what sort of questions we can ask. So on the right hand side, we've got the questions that link with that. What makes me feel safe? What can I or other people do to help create those feelings of safety? And then the last one is really about sort of acknowledging and validating what people might be experiencing. So these are very difficult times, and it's okay to have those conversations and acknowledge that people are feeling lost. They're feeling lost, maybe not just necessarily with bereavement, but loss in terms of changes that have gone on in their life. And this model really is about drawing upon what's already in existence within our settings or within us as individuals. So it shows us that we don't really need to look for specialist intervention. We can draw upon the community and the support within the community around us to help support our well-being and to help us move forwards. Thanks, Erica. So this is a really nice, simple model. And I really like this because I think it's really accessible, and it can help you to see the sorts of things that you're doing already to support your well-being, but what might be missing as well. So it's quite clear. We've got obviously the connections, so building relationships with others, active listening. I know that's hard in our busy lives, but making sure that when we are talking to people that we are actively listening, that we're making those connections, whether it be virtually or face-to-face. Being active, this doesn't necessarily have to be running a marathon. It can just be getting out for a walk, a 10-minute walk, just trying to, or just, walking up and down the stairs, or getting off the bus a bit earlier, just giving yourself that time to be active, because the research shows that people who are active, they're much less likely to suffer significant mental health difficulties. Giving, this might be things like contributing to charity, it might be giving, you know, your time, it might be listening to somebody who's in difficulty, and these things help us to feel a sense of purpose. Keeping learning, so it may be that there's a new skill that you want to learn, or a book that you're interested in reading, and again, I know we're all busy, but making that time to just keep learning and keep your mind active can help us with our self-esteem. And taking notice, Erica's going to talk in a few more slides about mindfulness, and just about stopping, you know, not being on autopilot all of the time, but just stopping and looking and noticing what's going on around us. So it might just be noticing that the blossoms coming out, the buds on the leaves, just being mindful and being present. Okay, thanks, Erica. So this is another nice way of sort of trying to promote well-being, and the activity there is asking you to think about yesterday and think about how many of these positive emotions or feelings that you experienced. So did you experience joy? Did you experience pride? Did you experience gratitude or serenity or hope? And this is based on the research of Fredrickson, who basically found that by paying attention and being mindful to these positive feelings and positive emotions, it can actually have a beneficial effect on our well-being, and it can increase our capacity to cope and build our resilience. So these things we probably do experience, but we don't necessarily draw them to mind. So we don't necessarily think out loud, well, what am I grateful for? Or what does bring joy in my life? I think sometimes we just whiz through life and we don't necessarily reflect on these things. So what this model shows us is that paying attention to these things, or writing these things down, can actually help create those positive feelings within us, and can increase our capacity to be able to sort of protect our well-being. It's a protective factor. Thanks, Erica. So we've talked about a few things that we might do. We've looked about making connections with others. We've looked about getting out and exercising. We've looked at, doing something for yourself, like developing a new skill. It might be interesting if you can share in the chat any top tips that you might have to promote your own well-being. So if you want to just put in the chat, it'd be really nice to hear some of the things that you do. I'm sure others will benefit from hearing the things that you do to support your own well-being. Sometimes it's nice just to get different ideas. If anyone wants to add anything in the chat, what you do to protect your own well-being.
We're hoping to use some of the lovely ideas from this afternoon's session and from this morning's session, and some focus groups that we've been doing with early years settings, and combine those into a post that we can share. So yeah, do show off, tell us what you're doing in your
adult ballet classes. Oh, one of my friends does those as well. Yeah, and picking daffodils, how lovely. Yeah, there feels like hope and optimism with spring, doesn't there, at the minute? Knitting, yeah, somebody this morning was talking about doing creative activities whilst watching telly. I wondered if that was knitting. Yeah, soaking in the bath. Baking, yeah, that's a nice therapeutic activity, isn't it, that can create those feelings of well-being, and you get to eat the cakes at the end of it, which is perfect. So yeah, some lovely ideas there. Please keep adding, because like Rachel said, we can then collate all of these. Gardening, yeah. Oh, hugging the mug. I like that. Taught myself to knit, yeah, find it very therapeutic. And yeah, gardening, definitely. I mean, this is one of the things that we recommend to our schools with young people, the sort of therapeutic activities like gardening. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Erica, just because I'm conscious we haven't got much time, but keep those things coming in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Yeah, it's brilliant to hear some of the things that you've been doing, particularly adult ballet lessons. That sounds lovely. I'm going to spend a bit of time now talking about mindfulness. And the reason being is there's so much research about mindfulness being really helpful for supporting our well-being. There's lots of studies that say that it improves our health, our general physical health. It improves our focus and concentration. It improves our calm, or helps increase our feelings of calm, our self-awareness, our empathy, and our understanding of others. So there's so much, and I know it's recommended by the NICE guidance now. as a way to help us manage, the stresses and strains of life. But what does mindfulness mean? It can mean very different things to different people, and it can be a bit of a journey, your understanding of mindfulness. For me, mindfulness is about slowing down, it's about taking my time and giving myself permission to be in the here and now. It's not about what have I got to cook for dinner later, or how did my meeting go yesterday and should I have done it differently. It's about forgetting about everything else going on and just being truly present. And I know that's really hard at the moment when we've got so much going on, so many things changing, we have technology going off all the time, and we have a bit of a culture where we respond to things or we react to things all the time. And that's a really important element of mindfulness. It's about being able to respond because we're slowing down, we're taking our time, we're being really present, we're able to respond to certain situations rather than reacting. So if something really bad happens or something difficult happens, sometimes we can get really angry, frustrated, and we'll react straight away. Whereas actually, if we take our time, we take our big breath and we respond, we quite often have a much better outcome. And I know some people suggest that they don't have time to be mindful, or they don't have the capacity, they've got so much going on. But if we are mindful, then actually we do things much quicker, because our way of responding means that we haven't got any other difficulties later on. We get things done rather than firing back to and forth. So what we thought would be good is to spend a little bit of time doing some mindfulness. As this is your half an hour slot, especially for you, we're going to do a guided imagery. You can join in if you want. If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. It's going to be a few minutes long. And the reason we're doing guided imagery is because it works really well with early years. A lot of young children love the idea of guided imagery and coming up with thinking about something imaginary. So get comfortable. You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever you prefer. Let your body begin to relax. Start taking breaths in and out, in and out. Notice how your body is feeling. Notice if there is any tension. As you are breathing, direct your breath to those areas of tension, helping you to feel relaxed and calm. We are going to go on a forest walk. Imagine that you are standing at the edge of a field. You see trees where the field begins. On the other side of the trees, you see a trail, and you walk out of the field towards this path, towards the trees, and you enter the woods. The light in the forest cascades through the leaves into a soft spray of light. The layers of the forest have various textures. The lower undergrowth is soft and green. There are ferns, mosses, and small growths reaching up towards the light. The upper canopy of the trees covers you like a stained glass roof. The light green leaves against the light blue and white sky create a soft, glowing light. The light is gentle and soothing. The path you are walking upon winds down a slight hill and it curves. It's well trodden and you continue to follow it. The path is a combination of soil, roots and small plants that's easy to walk upon. You decide to sit upon a tree that's fallen over. There are several different birds sounding. You can hear the breeze fluttering through the leaves on the trees. You close your eyes and you enjoy the sounds. After you've enjoyed your surroundings, you decide that you are ready to leave. You can see the path that brought you there, and you start back up the hill and around the bend. As you walk, many of the trees seem familiar. You see a bright entrance to the path ahead. As you approach this entrance, you stop and linger. Finally, you exit the forest and find yourself in a bright field. You open your eyes and return to your awareness. When you are ready, in the chat, if you want to just put a couple of words about how you might be feeling following doing that. Whilst you're doing that, just to say that there are so many different ways that you can bring mindfulness into your life. It's anything where you're just focusing on the here and now and being present. It might be going for a walk, it might be your commute to and from work. Even when you're with a friend, putting your phone away and just be there in the conversation. Mindful colouring. And also there's lots of fantastic mindfulness apps now as well. I know Headspace is really great. So there's lots of different things that you might be interested in where you can bring mindfulness into your life. And it's worth saying as well, if any of you are interested in bringing mindfulness into your school or your setting, it's really important that you do mindfulness for yourself first and think it is something of value, so that we're able to model that for the children that we work with. Carla, if we had anyone said how they're feeling?
No, nobody shared anything today. I can though, I feel quite sleepy now.
Have I sent everyone
I don't know
to
if that's
sleep?
a good thing. You must have done.
That's fun. We're going to show this video now of Kiddiwinkles Pre-school, and this is Charlene. She's absolutely fantastic, and she just wants to share her journey of using mindfulness.
Hi, my name is Charlene. I'm the manager of Kiddiwinkles Pre-school. Kiddiwinkles is a pack-away preschool in Eccles that caters for children aged 2 to 5. Every year we have a different cohort, but predominantly we are for children that are just accessing their 2-year funding. Most of our 3-year-olds are entitled to EYPP, and we always have a high level of SEN children. When we were approached by the Educational Psychology Service asking us to take part in the mindfulness pilot, we were very excited. I spoke to all my colleagues and everybody wondered what mindfulness could mean to 2- and 3-year-olds outside of what we were already doing, which included yoga and maybe some small bits of relaxation, including music. The training went ahead with Erica and Rachel, and we were all blown away and amazed by the things that they spoke to us about. In fact, the training was so good that all the staff left the session feeling quite relaxed and very mindful, and searching themselves to wonder how they could be more mindful for them. I would say that at the end of the training, there was a few staff that were actually quite sceptical as to how we would implement what Rachel and Erica was talking about. For the most part, their concerns were that a lot of our children were very young 2-year-olds, and those that were older often had attention difficulties or were quite complex additional needs children. We spoke about it and we decided the best way forward was to carry on with what Rachel and Erica had said about bringing everybody together, bringing all the staff together and trying not to make any big fuss. We put a lovely star on the door. We made sure that everybody that was coming into the preschool room knew that mindfulness was taking place. All the staff were present and in the moment, sat with the children, and within 2 weeks our most complex children were sitting down and in their own way joining in with the activities. To begin with, we focused on very, very simple breathing so that when we moved on to the next stage, the children understood what we meant by breath. So we used feathers and some ribbons that were lovingly made by one of our members of staff. They cost pennies, they really did. And all we did was encourage the children to blow. After using these 2 resources, we used our own hands and we talked about what our breath felt like on our hands. So we did. And we spoke about how making an O shape made the breath feel cold, and we also kept quite a relaxed mouth. We spoke about how that was warm. Once the majority of the children were fully understanding what breath meant and were able to breathe out and breathe in when we were talking about those things, we took it to the next level, which was rainbow breathing. Put very simply, everybody sits down, everybody is relaxed and in the moment. Put your hands together, take a big deep breath in, bring your arms up breathe out and make a rainbow. It was a great success. I would say quite easily 90 to 95% of the children were taking part in the breathing, and those that weren't were still present with the activity. They may have been sat on the peripheral, they may have just been sat on a member of staff's knee, but they were there willingly. What we found after we had invested a few weeks' time was that the children were beginning to understand how they were feeling, not happy and sad, but how they were feeling in terms of emotional need to re-energise. The children would come into the carpet themselves, and in the first instance just sitting, but after a while they were starting to ask for mindfulness. We shared what we were doing with our parents and our families, mainly by sending videos via our social media channels, sending little messages and little letters letting people know. As with all nurseries, you're always going to get some parents that just don't have the time to watch the videos, or they've missed the letter or whatever. We started to get videos from them. We'd get videos of a child. Make your hands like a rainbow, mummy. And the captions would read, what are you doing in nursery? Have they learned this in nursery? What are you doing? And when we explained and we encouraged them to go and look for the videos that we'd uploaded, they got involved. And then the parents saying, wow, we're doing a little bit of breathing before bed, and they're relaxing and they're going to sleep. Or they were so excited, and all of a sudden they stopped and they said, I'm breathing, mummy, I'm breathing. And they were finding them blowing on the hands, doing rainbow breathing, or simply just lying down, as we had started to do at the end of our sessions. Taking part in this pilot has been changing for us. It has helped the children, as I said before, to be calmer, to recognise their own needs for emotional fuelling. And a strange one, we have gone from having children that don't sleep and don't nap to actually having quite a few children that later on in the day are asking to go to sleep. We have never had that before with our preschool age children. They've never been wanting to. It's always been such a busy, chaotic setting with people going 90 miles an hour that actually they probably never realised they wanted to stop and sleep. And now it's very common to come in about 2 o'clock, 2:15, and see a few children just lying down, or they've asked for music, and that is outside of mindfulness. I think it's really important for some of these children to have that sleep, because by the time the parents arrive to pick them up, they're not cranky, they're not falling asleep in the pram, which means they're ready to have chats with their parents, they're ready to explore the outside, and they're definitely getting more from their time here and at home. I hope that anybody watching this is willing to give it a go, and if you are worried about whether it's suitable for your children or not, give it a go. You can always ring us and ask us more in-depth questions about our experiences, and any one of our staff would be willing to share their experiences with you. But also, as well as doing this for the children's benefit, I urge you to do it for yours. In these crazy times, coronavirus, this pandemic, it's really important for you as a practitioner to take 5 minutes out of your day, out of your time, and make sure you do something meaningful for you. That could be just lying on the floor in the staff room. It's not uncommon to happen in here now, because we as practitioners recognise that we need to refuel, we need to re-energise, and no, it can't wait until we get home. We need to be the best we can be for our children. I hope you found this informative. I know I've got my Salford accent on and probably don't look the most presentable, but there you go, that's the realities of working in nursery. Thank you for listening.
Oh, I stopped it.
Enjoy the rest of the day, guys.
Hopefully that's given you all some food for thought and some very wise words there, I think.
So just to finish off, it might be helpful for you to have a think about how you're going to use the information from today to sort of think about your own well-being, the well-being of staff within your settings. So thinking, what could you do within the next 24 hours to support your well-being? What could you do in the next week or over the next half term? I'm conscious of time, so we might not have time to share in the chat, but just useful to you to sort of start thinking about what you're going to do next. What will your next steps be in terms of supporting your well-being? And I think just finally, any further support that you might need, there's some links on there to websites, self-referrals to therapy or counselling, should you want to signpost somebody or yourself. So some really useful links on there. The other thing that I will put into the chat as well, the very first slide that I discussed, which was the recovery framework, I can put the document in there that was taken from as well, for those of you who want to read. So that was to support schools when pupils were returning after the first lockdown. So it was that idea of recovery, a recovery curriculum, and supporting that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Carla. And the image in the corner of that slide is another shameless plug to our early years EFS, because as we mentioned at the beginning, there is a whole sort of section of the manual dedicated to adult wellbeing, and a huge part of that is staff wellbeing, because it is so important. Okay, thank you very much, Carla and Erica. We're going to go on now to have a think about children with additional needs.